Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of the Swift Academy, the podcast. Today, I'm glad to be with Petros Efthymiou, which is a content creator and also the author of a great book in clean mobile architecture, which is the clean mobile architecture become Android, iOS, and Flutter architecture. Hello, Petros, and how are you?
Hi, Walid. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I think it's going to be a very interesting session. We're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about mobile development and mobile architecture. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yes. The main idea or the main topics of our podcast will be mainly to speak about the book, clean architecture, viable architecture, the MVA, the famous MVA that you invent in your books. But before that, I would like to speak about your personal and professional background
Mhm.
to begin with that, can you tell us about your career journey and how did you get started in software development and what led you to specialize in mobile architecture?
Yeah. So my journey started a little bit more than 10 years ago. Obviously, before that, I studied computer science. I graduated, and then I moved to my first job as a software engineer. Actually, I became a mobile engineer by luck, by accident.
Okay.
As initially, I was supposed to start off as a backend developer, but the company that hired me actually just created the first mobile team. Actually, mobile development back then was not very popular. It was the beginning
Mhm.
of mobile developer, if I may say.
Yes.
So yeah, I joined the company, a vendor software company that was like creating projects for other companies as a consultant. Yeah, there I had the luck to work with production projects from day one, big projects compared like to the projects as we usually do in Greece about like major telecom companies. After that, I went to a USA healthcare startup, which had like the technical department in Greece. And after that, I joined my current company, which is like a large fintech company which creates mobile apps for banks. So yeah, if I can summarize my career very, very quickly, that would be it.
Yes, it's great. A lot of developers that come from backend and both in Android and in iOS that come from Java backend developers or from macOS developers that convert, especially from especially in iOS since 2007, the date when the iPhone it's appeared. At this moment, a lot of developers make the transformation from his career from
Mhm.
macOS to iOS. The same thing from Java developers that find that Android it's much attractive and they have
Mhm.
that ability to change his career
Yeah.
from backend
Uh,
developers and I think it's important to have this ability to come from backend, but you know a lot of
mhm.
things about how things work in the backend, how
Mhm.
create API RESTful makes a difference
For
between
sure, yeah,
RESTful
and
uh,
especially,
as well.
yeah,
It's
like,
yeah, how to use Postman, how to test
mhm.
API, etc.
Yeah,
Which
yeah, for sure.
how yes, and to distinguish between the different type of API. And I think it's good for a developer that can do from backend. It will be much easier for him to switch to make a front end developers. Great,
Mhm.
great. I
Yeah.
think. Can you speak about your some of this key project and or roles in your career that
Mhm.
maybe significantly impact your expertise, especially in mobile architecture? Some projects that
Mhm.
you think it's very important and influence you to think about architecture in mobile.
Mhm. I think all three full-time jobs that I had so far were very important to shape like my journey on the architecture. for a different reason, it's one of those. Initially, the first one made me realize the importance of architecture in mobile development. And that is because we inherited a code base that was used like in the previous product of the telecoms company. And we very quickly realized that we cannot work with this project. This project is not maintainable, it's not well structured, there is no documentation at all, so it's impossible to continue working on it. So we pretty much had to trust this project and create a new one. And therefore, I quickly realized that if you don't architect your mobile app properly, it's going to end up to the trash bin. So it's really important. Otherwise, what you're building is not going to last in time. Then when I moved on the startup, I had to create everything by myself. I had a lot of time to try out new architectures, new libraries, and the new design patterns. And in the meantime, I had I needed to deliver something very quickly. So the architecture, even though it should be good enough, it also should be minimal and very pragmatic in order to deliver something to the market.
Yes.
And then to where I am now, which is a very large company. I mean, we are hundreds of mobile developers working on a single code base. And here we can see that we really need a much more enterprise, solid, well-structured architecture to be able to work all together at the same time on the same code base. So I think it's very important to have the experience of both a startup and an enterprise company. If you have only worked in startups or in enterprise companies, the experience that you have is not complete. You've only seen one part of the story, where, for example, in a startup, you need something minimal and quick, but in the enterprise, you need something much more structured. So you don't have the full picture. Like you are very myopic. You have a very myopic view, let's say.
Yes, yes, very interesting, especially when you the experience is when you are in the in the startup, you can check everything. You have the possibility to check everything to use because you have a lot of responsibility when you are in the startup. You can deliver, you program, you can make the CI/CD, you can make a lot of features in your application. At this moment, maybe there are a lot of pressure to deliver quickly to the customers. But when you this is some challenges. But when you are in a tech company or an great company with a lot of developers, at this moment we speak about modularization, how to create,
Exactly.
let people work on a specific feature or specific model, and not impact the all code of our of the application. At this moment, maybe we are confronted a lot to question about architecture, etc.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's not only the context of the company, but I think that you read a lot of books. You have mentors, experienced people that influence you to in your approach to coding. Can you speak about that? Because I think it's also very important.
Yeah, I mean, of course, first and foremost, I think I was influenced very early on from Uncle Bob, from Robert C. Martin, who actually wrote the initial clean architecture and inspired me a lot. And I took a lot of ideas from this book.
Yes.
Other than that, I would say that I really liked Martin Fowler's approach to evolutionary architecture. I like this concept a lot, and I think it's very, very important. As well, obviously, Kent Beck's XP programming. I think it's something everybody needs to get their hands on.
Yes.
So I think those three persons are pioneers in the industry. Everybody should know about them and their work. So that's the people who also influenced me early on in my career.
Yes, it's great. You speak about three of developers or people that that influence a lot the concept of architecture: Uncle Bob, Martin Fowler, and Kent Beck. people that maybe they didn't know, Kent Beck, it's the father of TDD, if you say, if you can say,
Of course, yeah.
which is his book, Test Driven Development by Example, which is a great book for and the main book for TDD. Martin Fowler, lot of book, but for my side, I know it's great book Refactoring, which is a great book for Martin Fowler with Kent Beck. I think the two in the same book. There are also maybe Martin Feathers that wrote the book
Actually,
Working Effectively with Legacy Code, which
very
great
important.
book.
Yeah,
Yes, very important books about that. I think this gang of four, if you say, of developers, of great people that make research and developer, and impact, which his book, which is creation, the history of architecture, both in backend and also in mobile. Great,
for sure.
a
Yeah.
lot. Yes, and I finish with in this first section with your educational career. Especially, I think that you have a lot of materials online,
Mhm.
courses that you create, especially for Android. If I didn't say a mistake, how did you start sharing your knowledge online about software?
Mhm.
And especially clean mobile architecture, have you I think that you have created an online education material, not
Mhm.
only the book that we have, the book, the clean mobile
Yeah.
architecture. You have, can you speak about
Yeah.
this materials online?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, initially I started like my educational career as an instructor, like a classroom instructor. So I started
Yes,
like teaching students who either wanted to switch their careers from something else to development, or like I did some company trainings where I was upskilling the developers of the companies.
yes,
But yeah, after I realized that it's also a good opportunity to do something online and sell it like in the worldwide context rather than just in a classroom where you can teach maybe 10, 20, or 30 people. You can teach more than that. So I actually started off with Udemy courses. I
mm,
built some about the Android development. As you said, I'm primarily an Android developer, even
mm,
though for the last 4 years I'm also developing iOS applications, and I have also
okay,
done quite a fair bit of backend.
mm,
So I think it's important if you want like to teach about architecture to realize all the domains, not just your own particular domain.
mm,
And yeah, to your question, I started with Udemy courses, which I actually still do. I currently do some courses about the Kotlin multi-platform development that can be used
yes,
in both Android and iOS. And
Carmem,
of course,
yes,
the book, which I think it's my biggest work so far, that is about architecture, is about actually all the mobile platforms, Android, iOS, or Flutter. And here you can see that architecture-wise, they don't differ. They are pretty much the same. What
yes.
differs is maybe the technicalities, but not the essence of development.
Yes, it's great that you have the time to share your knowledge using Udemy or other platform, because it take a lot of time to think about how we can offer a good content to people. It's very challenge, I think, because there is not a lot of developer that have this ability to share knowledge and to create very respectful content to the community,
Mhm.
and write also a book. That's it's great for me. We can deep dive to the main topics of our podcast, which is the book, the Clean Mobile Architecture: How to Become Android, iOS, and Flutter Architect.
Mhm.
And for me, the first question that came to my mind, it's your motivation for writing. What motivated you to
Mhm.
write Clean Mobile Architecture book? Was there is a particular moment or project that inspired you to start this book?
Mhm. Yeah, so a good question. Actually, as I told you, I was since a young age interested in like education, about like classroom trainings and then Udemy courses and stuff like that. And actually, some book publisher company about technical books noticed some of those courses, and they got in touch with me, and they told me, yeah, we like your content. Would you consider writing a book together with us? So I started this discussion with the publisher. We made a lot of conversations, and after some time, we were discussing maybe for a few months. I decided that maybe it's better if I want to write a book to do it by myself and not by a publisher. The reason was that mostly was like the process that the publishers wants the book to be written. They see it a bit like a project, and with project management that you have to pre-think all the chapters that you're going to write, and then they track you when you finish those chapters. But I was sure even before I started writing the book, and it definitely got confirmed when I did write the book, that the initial idea I had about the book was not good. I had to major restructure the chapters at least 3 times to produce the current result, which is not the way that the publishers see the book. They want to put it out faster, quick, and maybe if the quality is not that good, it's okay because they produce so many books. So yeah, I decided to write myself. I didn't knew if I could write it, so I said, start by writing a page. I wrote the page. Then I thought, if you can write the first chapter, you can write the whole book. I didn't know if I could do it, but in the end, I managed to write the first chapter, and I continued until I wrote the whole book. Yeah.
Okay, it's great. The story of the book, it's great. Your perseverance to make things and to make things in the manner that you want, in the behavior that you want. And at this moment, I think the motivation to create or to write the clean mobile architecture came with the time. A lot of revision, of review of your books, etc.
Yeah, for sure.
Take times. I think it takes you 1 year to write the book or something, or much than 1 year.
Yeah, I would say more or less 1 year, a little bit more than that, but yeah, a bit more than
1
one
year.
year, pretty much.
Okay. It's great. It takes time for people that
For sure.
he want to write books, etc. It's not
I
easy,
actually
but yes.
I did like the majority of the work during the pandemic when I was quarantined and I couldn't like do much
You have that.
outside of my house.
Yes. You have a lot of time to focus to writing the books.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think I have I know that there is a book in not in clean architecture, but in iOS developer that from Egyptian developer that they write the book in the pandemic. They say that when they went
Yeah.
in pandemic, at this moment we have the time to focus to write the books to. I think the pandemic at this moment it was good for some reason for
Yeah.
people. Okay.
Definitely help not having distractions, outside of.
Yes. Okay. I think that based on your experience, what do you see as the biggest challenge in mobile development that today that your books address what kind of challenge in
Mhm.
our mobile development that your book address and give solution to him?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a very good question. I think the problem currently that I see when I'm like working either in my company or like the previous ones, I see like two groups of people. One group is like very passionate about architecture and sees things a little bit dogmatically, like we always have to do everything with clean architecture. We need to apply all the design patterns that are available out there, and we need to
Mhm.
be very, 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 very clean about everything. And the
Yes.
other group of people is that they are a bit tired of that. They think they don't work, they don't like them, or they tried them the result actually wasn't good, and they just want to get done with the tasks, as
Yes.
quickly as possible and produce the value for the business.
Yes.
And I think that's a problem that we are divided in those two groups. And I think what's missing is the realization that those practices are not always needed as Group A thinks, but
Yes.
they are also needed to solve specific problems that we face in the project. So what we should do is not only learn the practices, but also learn when to use them and when not to use them. Because they are not best practices, in my opinion. Best practices is a wrong word. They are practices that solve problems. If you have these problems, you can use the practices. If you don't have, you shouldn't use them. So I think those people need to find the solution in the middle and
Yes.
actually realize, when each practice is useful and when not. That's a problem I see today when I try to create a mobile app with other developers.
Yes. Some people maybe thought about the seniority of developer. When we come much more senior, maybe you begin to think about clean architecture, design pattern, etc. But sometimes it comes with dogmatic, and especially when we come from some people that they think that clean architecture, solid principle, etc. are a symbol of craftsmanship, etc. Maybe people
Yeah.
that and because I'm a craftsman, developer, etc. I should write. I should practice all this design pattern. I should write in clean architecture, etc. At this moment, they come a lot of problems, especially with developer that didn't have this attitude, and they are not convinced about that. And at this moment, we have a lot of problem, maybe ego at this moment, and people they think that they are not able. Usually speak about clean architecture, etc. They take a lot of time to. We have a lot of layer. We take a lot of time to write tests, etc. And conflicts maybe come, and to handle these conflicts between people, it's very hard, very hard. And
Exactly.
but sometimes it can personal, it's not
That's
professional,
another big
sometimes
problem. Yes.
it can
Yeah.
personal, I know a lot
Yeah.
of story about that. That's why it's
Yeah.
for me it's great to speak about dogmatic, and to let people take the time to make things, to understand why clean architecture it's good. It's not mandatory, it's good. And especially when you have a good great project with a lot of developer, etc. And that's why we will speak about that, the why it's important, clean architecture in our daily
Yeah.
development.
I mean,
Yes.
whether you think you need clean architecture or you don't need it, you are both right. The
Yes.
context of what you're building
Yes.
actually defines if you need it or not.
Yes. Okay, we will deep dive also in the book. We can't speak about all the topics that you write in the book. That's why I have choose some topics, especially in the beginning of the book. You speak about soft and hard boundaries in the book,
Mhm.
which are two different types of boundary, soft and
Mhm.
hard. What do you mean by that, first of all, and how to this two concepts differ?
Mhm. I think to realize what is a boundary and what is a soft and hard boundary is one of the most important things that someone who is interested in architecture should really comprehend. So, what is a boundary? A boundary is anything that separates code in two places.
Mm.
So, for example, if we have two functions, we have created a boundary because we have some code in function A and some code in function B.
Yes.
And what is the boundary crossing? The boundary crossing is when function A is calling function B. This is a very soft boundary because particularly if those two functions are in the same class, you don't have any restriction. You can
Yes.
call function B from function A directly. If you want to make a little bit harder boundary, you take this piece of code and this piece of code, like the two functions, and you put them in separate classes. So now you have two classes with the two functions. And now, if you want to cross the boundary, one class needs to import the other, and after you import it, then you can use the two functions. This is a little bit, it's still a soft boundary, but a little bit tougher. If you want to toughen it up even more, then instead of having direct dependencies in the two classes, you can create an interface in between. So you can say that the dependent class is depending now on the interface and not directly to the implementation. And the other class is, or the protocol, for example, is implementing the protocol so that those two classes can now communicate with a stronger boundary. And why do we want a boundary to be stronger? That's because the dependent class can break from the other class if the other class decides to change its implementation. But if you have the interface in between, the other class cannot just break, change the signature, because now you have an interface like showing you what you need to do. So that's now a bit of harder boundary. And if you want to make the boundary even harder, then you take those classes with interfaces and you put them into separate modules, for example. And now those modules need to specifically, one module depend on the other in order to have this kind of boundary crossing. So yeah, to summarize, a boundary is anything that separates code, and there are a lot of layers of boundaries from softer to harder. You want hard boundaries in order to protect the dependent code, but also hard boundaries come at the cost, because to create interfaces, to create different modules, and to do all that work, you pay some time. So you need to realize, do you want soft boundaries or hard boundaries for each specific case?
Okay, it's great. You speak about boundary, etc., and I think that you speak indirectly about dependency inversion when you speak about to create interface, etc. Yes, part of it. When you speak about not using the concrete implementation of our class struct, etc., but passing by using protocol interface, which can aid the implementation and let our second class not dependent of the first class in their implementation. When the implementation of this class change, but it's hard to find that, because you should have some contract between this contract should not change, and at this moment if it change, it breaks all, because when we make imagine that, okay, we have protocol, etc., and we create, if we don't pass especially by a wrapper that cached something about, imagine that we call an API which return a model, and this model is dependent of the how API is created. If we try to use this model, the same model, people that come from iOS, the same codable model, or I think the data access object model, use it in the user interface. We create a very we coupled our code, our user interface classes with an infrastructure classes which give us the model data that can come from the API. And at this moment, we are very, very coupled with our user interface. It's very coupled about the infrastructure. And this moment come boundary to create these barriers between layers, etc. And I think it's difficult to find the good. It's important to have the idea to make things first of all. We create data that didn't depend of the infrastructure.
I think the important thing is that you know that with hard boundaries, You decouple things harder. You have like lower coupling. With soft boundaries, you don't have this, but the advantage of soft boundaries is that they are much easier to implement. They require much less time. So the trick here is to realize in every situation, do you need strong boundaries or hard boundaries? And like the hint is the more people they work in the same code base, the harder boundaries you want in order for those people to be able to work independently. Now, in a startup that you are maybe 2 or 3 mobile developers, you don't want to spend the time to make so much modularization, so many hard boundaries. You don't need this. You are 3 people, you sit in front of each other, just make it happen. But it's important to lay the soft boundaries in place in order to be able to transform them to hard boundaries in the future.
Okay.
And the other question is, where do you put the boundaries? And this is like, okay, it's very context dependent, but one decision that you have to make, and it will probably last in the project for its lifetime, is do you put the boundaries between the features? For example, you have 3 features and you separate those features with feature modules or feature packages. It depends on how hard you want the boundary to be. Or you put boundaries between the layers, like presentation layer, data layer, framework layer, etc.
Framework, etc.
So yeah, those are important decisions. Where do you put the boundaries, and how hard the boundaries are, and when you decide to make them harder. All those things are questions that an architect needs to really be able to answer in every situation.
Okay, great. I think people can read in the books also about hard and soft boundary. We can go further with another concept that you speak about. It's the minimum viable architecture, something like MVP in the product.
Yeah.
And I heard about this new concept. I think that I didn't know about this concept before reading your book. And can you explain this concept for people who listen or watch us?
For sure, yeah. As you guessed by yourself, this is a technical equivalent of the minimum, the MVP, the minimum viable product.
Yes.
So this is the technical term of it. What does it mean? I mean, it is the simplest architecture that we can design in order to implement the requirements that we have while we respect the software principles. So we see what requirements we have, and then we design the simplest architecture in order to respect the principles. Now, an example that I can give about this, something that usually comes up in projects is, for example, should we use use cases? Do we need them or we don't need them?
Yes.
And there is a to answer this, it's very simple. Take the requirements that you currently have and check the backend API and see if you need to add business logic inside your app. And when I say business logic, I mean like calculations, algorithms, numbers, stuff like this. I don't mean presentation logic. If something needs to appear red, green, big, small, depending on the data. I mean business. So if you see the current requirements and you never really have to add business logic into the mobile app because the backend, for example, is taking care of the business logic, then don't make use of use cases. Your MDA doesn't need the use cases.
Yes.
But at the moment that you will start receiving features that require business logic, it's important to realize that now what used to be viable is not. Now the minimum viable requires us to have business logic, which means we need to change the architecture. We need to add use cases because now we need to add business logic. So it's a combination of MVP and evolutionary architecture, if I may use the terms.
Yes, and the minimum viable architecture, it depends of the business logic. Maybe when logic it's adopted by the backend concept like BFF, back for front, that come to reduce the use of use cases because all the logic come from the backend, etc. And all the business rules, etc. come from the backend. At this moment, no need to have use cases. No need to have the architecture using like in the MVC clean architecture. You have model view, model use cases, also repository, also service, etc.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because a lot of people think, okay, clean architecture for me is that, and at this moment, no need to have use cases, and we can use the MVA model view interactor sample architecture. No need to have the use cases. But some dogmatic people, I think they don't accept that.
Yeah,
and
they're like Uncle Bob said that, so we must have them. Well, no.
Yes.
If you see that a use case is just exposing a function which the view model is calling, and it doesn't do anything. It just forwards this function call to some other repository or data source. So this use case doesn't actually have a responsibility. It means that you just write it because you like it. It does nothing.
Yes. Nothing. Yeah. Because in this use case, you have code that call only a repository. Exactly. The repository that make the code. You have one instruction in your use case, and you think that you need you have your use case. For me,
you don't need it. No.
that come from over engineering. but people maybe they think that okay, but we need to have a pattern or something that we have one instruction in our use case, but you need to have a use case at this moment. It's come of the flexibility of the people, how he think about architecture and code. We have the same. I think that I have the same case 4 years before, when in Viper, which is a view interactor presenter, and a lot of time we didn't have to use interactor because at this moment we can directly use our data that come from the repository, but not passing by the interactor. But some people maybe say, Petros, that okay, but when you directly use from your view model, you try to use the repository directly. You don't create a boundary between how to present things, the API present things, and the presentation. I think that these people forget that we can create wrappers between our repository and our UI interface. And at this moment, we can't use we create this boundary, or we invert the dependency between our user and there is a lot of things that we can do, and yes, I tell you.
There are a lot of things, like dependency inversion or other practices, but still you need to always think if and when you need them. It's not to just learn them and then apply them everywhere. You need to understand the problem that they are solving, and then you need to understand if you have this problem in your current app.
Okay, it's great. We go further, with a third concept. I think third chapter in your book. It's about the golden circle of software development, and it's a term used in your book. And maybe you'd share your screen to explain that. What exactly is it? And I think it's a very important concept that you spoke about in your book. Yes.
This one I will share my screen better. Okay. And let me find, this is like the book in the PDF format. Okay. So the golden circle of software development is I got inspired to build this from Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, where he's also explaining the golden circle. And he also inspired me on how to structure my book and my thought around the mobile architecture. So what we have, as Simon Sinek suggests, we first have in the center the why, then out of the center we have the how, and then outside we have the what. So let's start with why, as the book suggests. why we do everything with architecture, like why we have architecture and practices and principles and all that. We have it because we want to be effective and efficient. So effective means that we are able to implement our features without bugs. And the efficient means that we are able to implement our features and do our work as fast as possible. That's the reason to do everything. Then we move on to the how. So in order to be effective and efficient, we need to maximize the fundamental software objectives, which is like to have readable code, maintainable code, testable code, etc. All those are in the book. How to have readable, maintainable, testable code? You need three important things to separate the concerns, to have high cohesion and low coupling. How to separate the concerns, have high cohesion and low coupling? Well, there you can apply the solid principles. And I have an extra S here because in my book, I'm also suggesting, beside the single responsibility, I'm suggesting the single concern principle.
Yes.
So you can do it with a solid, with inversion of control, and other very important practices. And now, if you apply all those things in the how, what do you create? You create clean architectures, hexagonal architecture, MVI, MVVM, and other concrete examples of architecting a mobile app. So pretty much this is the golden circle of software development, and it's also a very easy way to memorize everything that is in the book, because all those terms over here have a specific chapter in the book. And also those parts, why, how, and what, are the three parts of the book. So if you want to have the whole book in your mind in a very easy way, you can just keep this picture and you'll be fine.
Yes. I think it's like the onion architecture. People that but the concept is but you focus on the why we code. We code for some reason to our customer to have to product great application, great product for people who will use that. How we can do that? There is tools. These tools, they are separation of concern, low coupling, high cohesion. For what? To create the scalability of the product. It will be much easy to maintain our product, etc. And after that, you have also some technical tools, if you say. Solid principles are a principle this 5 principle are great to help us to make the separation of concern, to low coupling using for example the dependency inversion, etc., which is a great principle. After that, you can make that using clean architecture, microservice architecture, hexagonal architecture, MVVM, if you want. But in your mind, when you develop, you have this idea that your product must be have this ability to be to evaluate and to have this evolution. It should be easy. At this moment, you should think about that in the beginning. I think it's difficult, when you come with legacy code to have that, but there is a lot of technicals and tools to adapt your legacy code that maybe it's not low coupling, it's a lot of cohesion, no much cohesion, and also there is not separation of concern between modules, etc. But there is technical, we spoke about refactoring, etc. But I think that this circle, it's very great. You can summarize all the books, as you say, using this golden circle of efficiency. Okay. Thanks. Okay, we can move maybe to speak about some architecture patterns I think that you have prepared a demo also for that to speak
Mhm,
about some architecture pattern discussed in your books and
mhm,
what they differ from traditional pattern that we know, singleton, factory, etc. There is
mhm.
what we call architecture patterns, like people say like MVVM, it's an architecture pattern, MVC, MVI, etc. Can you speak about that's
Mhm,
architecture patterns?
Yeah. So I will speak about like the two mobile architectures that I am recommending in the book.
Yes,
And those architectures live here in the what section. So
yes.
it's we combine all those things in the center to build them. And those are actually two public repositories that you
Mm,
can find them online. And I also have very extensive um, description and explanations on those two in the book.
yes,
I have those versions both in Android and in iOS.
yes.
So the first one is what I call the pragmatic clean architecture, which is a version of actually clean architecture, but that is a little bit more flexible to change and that a startup, for example, can use. And then I have the what I call the mobile microservices architecture, which is inspired by the equivalent microservices architecture in the backend. And it is a very, very rigid enterprise architecture that
Mm.
actually should not be used unless there are maybe hundreds of developers working in the
Ah,
single
okay.
mode code base. It's more of
Mm.
like an experimental architecture to actually understand all the decisions that an architect should make. So here, if you visit those repositories, you will find a lot of information already. I'm explaining like all the patterns and practices that I'm using. I'm also describing here the technical libraries. This is actually a project that you can download and run on Xcode. But what I would like to focus on is the layering and then the architectural overviews of those two architectures. So here we can see the pragmatic clean layering. We have the domain in the center, which contains
Mm.
the entities and the business logic. Then the application, which contains the use cases. Out of that, we have the data, which gives us the data access. And in this case, it only comes from the network, as we don't always need to have a local database. And the outer circle is the framework, which contains all the iOS specific code, like the UI, or like the class that is making HTTP calls, or if we want like some file access, all this is specifically iOS framework code. Of course, this is following the clean architecture, which means that the inner circles are not allowed to know anything about the outer circles.
Mm.
And the equivalent layer diagram of the microservices architecture is a little bit more complicated. As you can see here, we have the first thing that you will notice is that the lines here are a bit more rigid, uh, while here they are softer, and this makes a distinction of hard versus soft boundaries.
Yes.
Here we have separation in packages. Here we
Okay.
have separation in modules, which means we have both feature modules. So
Okay.
every feature is a separate module that will be imported to the main project, but also each layer is a separate module. So you have
Mm.
a grid of features and layers, and
Yes.
everything is actually a separate project,
Oh,
which
okay.
makes like strong boundaries everywhere.
Yes.
While here, for example, you don't have separate modules, you just have packages for features and for layers. So it's much
Yes.
easier to cross those boundaries than
Yes.
it is to cross them here. And also here you can see that we are separating the presentation from the data. Um, they also have a hard boundary between them because they are not allowed to know about each other. And also one is not outer from each other because if the presentation was outer or the data was outer, it means that the presentation could depend on the data, which is not the case in a very strict clean architecture.
Mm.
So yeah, besides the layers, you can also see the architectural diagrams over here. Those lines over here represent soft boundaries, and you can see that we have the framework code, which is
Yes.
UI code. Then you have the presentation code with a view model and the view state. We are applying the MPI pattern. And then the presentation, as we can see here, it is allowed to depend to the application layer. So we have this dependency over here. We have the use case. Again, you need to think if you need the use cases. In my example, I did decide to use them because I still think about an app that is trying to solve a complex problem and that it will contain business logic. If your app doesn't contain, you can skip it. Here we can see a classic example of dependency inversion. So because the application layer is in the center of our layers, but the use case needs to retrieve some data, and this data is going to come from the data layer. Here we are applying the classic pattern of inversion of control, where we build an interface that is dedicated to the needs of the use case, and then our data source is implementing this interface. I could speak a lot about the dependency inversion, but I won't do it now. I mean, if you really want more info, you can find it on the book.
Yes.
So this is the data layer, and again, we are inverting the dependency over here because the actual service that is making the HTTP call, it is still on the framework layer. As you can see, we have framework layer over here, and we also have framework layer over here. The HTTP client is still a framework. It is very iOS specific code. And you don't want the data layer to depend on the framework layer. So you apply the dependency inversion over here. And this way you have a clean architecture example, but with soft boundaries. Whereas if we go to the microservices architecture, you can see that, I mean, you will see it on the code, but here I just made this a little bit more rigid to depict that those boundaries are hard and they are not packages, they are actually modules, separate modules, and each of those modules have a concrete dependency to the other one. And here I have also decided to make use of a local database, and here we have the repository pattern. Maybe in an enterprise app, you also want to store everything locally instead of just having the service. Other than the rigid boundaries, which trust me make a very big difference, it's much more rigid and it won't be flexible for a startup, but maybe for an enterprise app it will make some sense. That's those are the major differences. Of course, you are free to check the projects online, download them, and play with them. But if you want to get like the full picture of what we're doing and why we're doing it, you probably need to read the book.
Yes. Great demo from both the clean architecture, the simple clean architecture, if you can say, and the microservice with hard and soft boundaries. I think it's a great example, and people can go to focus a lot about this concept and to read the book and also to follow you to understand much more this concept. Okay, we can maybe speak about how it's related to testing, because if you when you share it, we see a lot of mocking, etc. How does clean mobile architecture facilitate easier testing and maintenance of our mobile application? What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Because I think that clean mobile architecture, it's the idea, the basic idea, scalability, etc., and also maintainability using testing or types of testing.
Sure, yeah. I mean, one of the major reasons we apply proper architectures is to create testable code.
Yes.
And we do facilitate the stability greatly, first of all, by separating the concerns, because as you can see, every concern is isolated in a very specific layer, which in return is represented by a specific class. But I think the number one point is that by these architectures, you remove as much code as possible outside of the framework layer. And the framework layer is very hard to test because in order to test it, you need to have like UI tests in place to get an emulator and test everything. And if you have presentation logic, business logic, or other kind of logic in this layer, you need to write UI tests, which are difficult to write. They take time to run because you need the real app to run. While if you can run everything with unit tests, like in normal Swift classes or Kotlin classes, it's much easier. They run fast and they are much easier to write. But also with separation of concerns, you can write very small dedicated tests to test something very particular rather than running something that's testing too many things because the class is doing too many things. So testability is a major concern for every architecture.
Yes, great. And what about performance and optimization? Because I think that clean mobile architecture can help up performance, especially when we speak about modularization, the time to build the model, etc., and to create agnostic model. And that's moment I can compile every model agnostic from the others, and people the time of compiling and the performance of our application, how can be impacted by using clean mobile architecture.
Yeah, so you have two different types of performances. One is the performance of the app when you run it on the mobile phone, and the other
Yes.
is the development performance, like how fast it is to build it, to deploy it, and stuff like that.
Yes.
So when you talk about the first type of performance, like the user performance, the architecture doesn't really have much impact on that. Actually, I'm currently creating some courses about how to build performant apps, but they have nothing to do with architecture. But about the second thing, development performance, it's very important because when you have a segregated code base into different modules, and you write code in one module to perform, like to write a feature or make some change, then the build systems are smart enough to realize that only this module has changed, and they only rebuild this module and not the entire application.
Yes.
And this can, especially to extensive applications, it can make a big difference because to build the whole thing, sometimes it might even take like 10 or 20 minutes, depending on how it's set up.
Yes.
But if you have this module segregation, it will be very, very fast to do it. So,
yes, it will be.
to development performance, yes.
Yes. Okay. We'll think about maybe there is any interactive component or exercise in the book that you find particularly effective for helping. I think it's my son. Sorry. I will. Okay. Still alive. No problem. If there is any interactive component or exercise in the book that you find particularly effective for helping readers to understand this concept.
I mean, not interactive because it's a book, but for every concept that I have in the book, I also contain coding examples, and the coding examples are both in Android and iOS, so I don't favor one side or the other. You can see everything over there. And besides the coding examples, of course, you can check the repos, both for Android and iOS, that contain pretty much all the practices that we have in the book. So repos and coding samples is the tools that I use to make my point, the theoretical point of the books.
That's great. Great for. I think that we before we finish the discussion with you, people think how can people follow you and buy the book. Maybe you can advise him about that.
Yeah, maybe it's better if I share my screen again. So I think the easiest way to find my work is to just visit my website. It's petrosefthimiou.com. If you just Google my name, you will find it. And here, I have you can check how to buy the books. You can check my Udemy courses. I'm also writing blog posts for free that if you follow, you will get notified about. So yeah, just check my website, check here my social media, and you will find all the info about me, about the book. And you can even reach out to me with questions if you have any.
Okay, it's great. Thank you, Petros. It was a great. I think it was. We have for sure a second episode to speak deep dive about the book, because we have only 1 hour to take people to understand this concept, to discover this product, to read the book, and maybe after that, after some months, we can go back and deep dive also in this concept with more practical maybe exercise projects, etc., and people can find and understand, have a lot of information about soft boundary, hard boundary, clean architecture, microservice architecture, dependency inversion, concept of solid principles, a lot of things that people can read in the books and follow you, also you in your online Udemy courses. Thank you, Petros, and I let you the final words if you want.
Thanks a lot, man. I mean, I always love talking about architectures and about mobile development.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure, we can't like cover all of the topics. Hello. We can't cover all the topics of the book in one session. I'll be happy to come again and discuss about it with you and your lovely son.
Yes.
But
Thank you.
but I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that the people who follow this
Yes.
podcast will enjoy it as well, and they can always reach out for questions. And yeah, I
Yes,
really wish
especially with
them
my son.
a great time.
In the final. Thank you, Petros, and thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.